Welcome to the Narcissist Slayers, a podcast focusing on recovery from narcissistic abuse. I'm your co-host, Hope Jay.
And I'm your co-host, Lynn Catalano.
And we are both survivors of narcissistic abuse. I am also an attorney working with survivors of narcissistic abuse and the founder and president of the Center for Hope of Western New York.
I'm an attorney, a narcissistic abuse coach, and the author of Wrecking Ball Relationships, How to Identify, Live With, or Leave the Narcissist in Your Life. Learn more about me at lynncatalano.com.
At the Center for Hope, we offer hope, help, and healing from narcissistic abuse. We are a nonprofit organization with a mission to provide legal advocacy, mental health support, financial advisement, and holistic healing services to help you down the path from victim to survivor.
You can find out more about our services by checking out our website, centerforhopewny.org. And please follow us on all platforms of social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Center for Hope WNY for helpful information about recovery from narcissistic abuse.
Today's topic on the Narcissist Slayers is trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is a very important topic to talk about because this is how the cycle of abuse starts. Is in order to get hooked in to a narcissist, you have to become trauma bonded to that narcissist. And it's really the first part of the cycle of abuse because it's the trauma bonds that keep you stuck in the relationship. Isn't that right, Lynn?
Yes, absolutely. And it is a cycle. It's a vicious cycle that feeds itself and keeps the victim trapped.
So we're going to talk today about the definition of trauma bonding. We're going to give a little history about what trauma bonds are and how they came to be known as trauma bonds, because I think it's really interesting. People can be trauma bonded in all different types of situations. And then we want to kind of delve into how trauma bonds form in the context of abusive relationships, particularly in intimate partner relationships with a narcissist. So Lynn, can you tell us about the history of trauma bonding?
You know, it is very interesting because when we talk about some of this terminology, a lot of it has been defined very recently in our recent history. So the term trauma bonding wasn't even coined until 1997. Patrick Carnes, who's a PhD, he happens to be a specialist in addiction therapy and the founder of the International Institute for Trauma and Addiction. So he defined it as dysfunctional attachments that occur in the presence of danger, shame, or exploitation, and considered it one of the human reactions to a traumatic situation.
You know, that's so interesting to think about it in that context, because I think a lot of times, you know, people don't understand or recognize that an abusive relationship rises to that level, right? Rises to that level of being constantly in a dangerous, you know, abusive situation where your body is really in fight or flight a lot of the time, which is, I think, you know, when we think about how trauma bonds form, you know, a lot of it is emotional and psychological, but there's a physical component to it as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And before the term was coined, the only term we had available was Stockholm Syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And that really referred to very specific kidnapping situation.
Right.
And that...
It's that phenomenon that you know, people have heard about, right? When someone is kidnapped or taken hostage, that's what actually when they're referring to in the Stockholm situation.
Yes.
That people tend to then to bond with, identify with, and then defend their abuser. Right?
And that happened then again with Patty Hearst, right? Very well known.
Yeah.
So,
and it happens in modern day situations too, when you see a person in an abusive relationship defending their abuser.
Yeah.
Part of what you're seeing is the manifestation of a trauma bond, right?
Yes, absolutely. So what's the modern definition like? How do you see it being used today?
Well, so I know that there were. Oh, we already talked about that.
Oh no, we didn't talk about that.
Okay, yeah.
Do you wanna talk about-
Let's talk about
situations.
Yeah, I want to just to give some context before we delve into like the specifics of how trauma bonds form in a narcissistic abusive relationship.
Okay, so where you'll see a trauma bond occur are situations like in a domestic abuse situation, in sexual abuse,
Yeah.
in kidnapping, incest, cults,
Yes.
unbelievable, elder abuse.
Cults are generally formed by narcissists or,
Yes,
pathological narcissists and malignant narcissists and sociopaths.
Oh my God.
So when you see that level of, the control that the cult leader has over, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like you're looking at a group manifestation of really the relationship, the one-on-one relationship that a victim has with a narcissist in the context of an intimate partner relationship.
Wow.
I know that's a difficult reach for some people to understand that sort of a trauma bond can form in an intimate relationship, the same kind of control that a cult leader might have over a group of people who are, sort of beholden to that cult leader. But I do think there are a lot of similarities in an intimate relationship when you're feeling a lot of those same feelings towards your abuser.
Wow.
And oftentimes, because I happen to watch a lot of these shows. I watch a lot of shows that have to do with, pathological serial killers and cult leaders and things of that nature. And you see how they groom their victims. How they break down their barriers. We're going to talk about how this is done in the context of a one-on-one relationship. Yeah. But you see the same thing happening in these movies. And I think a lot of people who have been victimized by a narcissist recognize it. You recognize it when you're seeing it on TV.
Well, here's the thing that I think is the big difference between an abusive relationship where there's some kind of physical abuse and an abusive relationship where there's purely emotional abuse. People find it hard to convince others that they're being abused.
That's right.
Sometimes they find it hard to convince themselves. And that, excuse me, is so painful to witness.
Yes.
And what happens is it's like the drip, drip, drip of emotional terrorism that's occurring, and it's you're gonna share something about the cycle.
Yes.
Because I think that it feeds itself.
It does.
And it binds the person to stay in the relationship.
Well, I mean, I think it applies in any situation. It applies when you're, a victim of domestic violence. It applies when you're a victim of sexual abuse.
Yes.
It applies when you're being groomed by a cult leader. Right. I mean, it applies in any of these situations where there's a powerful, charismatic, narcissistic person who is attempting to gain control over a victim. Yeah. And the way that trauma bonding happens in the context of a relationship in an intimate relationship with a narcissist is, they start out their whole end goal, Lynn, and I think, we don't know this when we first come upon a narcissist because they're showing their charming face, right? They're showing their mask to the world. Right. And you think that you've met this incredible person. I just read something yesterday I think is applicable to this conversation. When you first meet a narcissist, this is one of the ways that you can kind of determine whether you're in the throes of love bombing or whether you're actually sort of in the beginning stages of a healthy relationship. Because if you're in the throes of love bombing with a narcissistic personality, you're gonna feel something that's akin to like a high, you're on some sort of a drug, right? You're gonna feel this rush, and you're going to feel this excitement, and you're, every time you're around this person, they're just, pumping you up, and a lot of times they're infusing you with all of these glorious kinds of, you're the perfect person for me. You're so wonderful. You're so great. They're putting you so high up on a pedestal that, it's a dangerous indicator. And I actually read this in one of the articles that I read in preparing for today. If somebody's putting you up on a pedestal, that's a major red flag. It's a major red flag because, the only place that you can go from up here is down, okay? But if someone is pumping you up to that extent, that's not realistic.
Wow.
Like none of us, as much as, we may be great people and we're empathic and we're all this, but none of us are perfect.
No.
And if you're getting, initially in these initial stages of a relationship, it's part of the first part of creating this trauma bond is this love bombing, the love bombing that you're going to be experiencing, because you feel like you're in this magical situation where you found this wonderful person, this person who's so fantastic in so many ways, and you're seeing yourself through that person's eyes. That's the lure.
Yeah.
That's the hook. That's how they get you, because who doesn't want to be seen like that? Who doesn't want to be seen as this perfect, wonderful person who's, all these things that they're telling you and reflecting back at you, and you're believing that you are so safe.
Yeah.
So safe in the company of this person.
Right.
So they've got to get you there, right? Where you are, that's the place you're always going to be striving to get back to, because that's the mark, right? You're there in this, perfect love bombing phase of the relationship. But the next part of how the trauma bond is created is that they start devaluing you.
Yes.
Okay. And that's also the second stage of the cycle of abuse when you're involved with a narcissist, is you have the love bombing, and then you're going to start slowly, it generally starts slowly, where they start criticizing you, and, all the things that they originally thought were so great about you, suddenly they're taking umbrage with, and that's not good, and this isn't good, and, why did you do that, and why didn't you do this? And little by little by little by little, they're taking that perfect sort of, image, and they're breaking it down. And they're not just breaking down the image, they're breaking you down.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all very calculated, manipulative, emotional abuse that's happening, because they need to break you down.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Their only goal from the beginning, from the first time that they decided that you were going to be a good target for this sort of abuse, their only goal is to gain control over you.
Right.
It's all about power and control. It was never about bonding with you. It was never about, forming this wonderful relationship with you. It was never about the long-term plan that they told you and all the things that they promised in the future faking. It was about hooking you on the drip, right, of this toxicity, and then breaking you down, because suddenly now you're questioning everything, but most of all, what you're questioning is yourself. Yes. You're questioning your own, your own self-worth. You're wondering what's wrong with you. You're wondering why this person who saw you as this wonderful person is now only seeing your flaws. Okay. Yeah. So this is that seesaw, right? When we talk to clients, I talk to clients every day, and they're always, they describe it as like this roller coaster, right? You're in this roller coaster relationship with someone. By the way, red flag, red flag, red flag.
If there's high highs
ding, ding,
and
ding,
low
ding,
lows,
that if you're not feeling a sense of sort of stability with somebody, if it's like these high highs and these low lows, you're very likely dealing with a narcissist or somebody that's disordered, because they're banking on that you're going to stick it out for the next high. And that brings me to the most important thing that people need to understand about trauma bonding and how it happens. It's something called intermittent reinforcement. Ooh. And Lynn, you and I were just discussing this before we made this podcast. Lynn and I both happen to have undergraduate degrees in psychology, and both took abnormal psychology. And one of the things that we learned in that major was about intermittent reinforcement.
Yep.
Do you want to?
No, you please. I want to talk about signs of a trauma bond.
Okay.
You tell me.
All right. So intermittent reinforcement is basically how a person is conditioned to expect certain things to happen. So. And we learned about this like in rat studies, and it's actually something that the people have figured out works so well on human beings that they use it in casinos and other things to reinforce you to keep putting your money in those slot machines, right? And the way it works is you never know what you're gonna get, right? If you're gonna, you never know how many quarters you're gonna put in that slot machine until you get the big payout, right? The rat doesn't know how many times they're going to hit that lever until they get the, in these studies, a lot of times they were giving them cocaine.
Right? We're giving them pellets. Okay. I don't know where you went to school.
So, well, this is because one of the studies was how many times would they press this lever until they killed themselves, right?
Oh my God.
Okay.
Yes.
So in any event, if you don't know, if there's no rhyme or reason to this, you will keep working at it.
Yep.
You will continuously press that lever, put the money in the slot machine, keep on sticking in this relationship with the narcissist, because you don't know when he or she is going to turn around and give you that reinforcement of the love that you experienced in the beginning, that love bombing. Because the thing that these people understand is that they know they can't always be abusive. They're going to flip back around. This is part of the cycle. They have 3 channels. I tell people this all the time. It's rage, charm, and self-pity. Okay. Oof. But when they're on the charm channel, everyone, we know this. They are the most charming people on the planet.
Well, so
right.
I feel like from my clients, I hear things like, it's not that bad.
Right.
They don't hit me.
Right.
They are good about certain things.
And also, what I think happens a lot is, you'll go through a bad period with a narcissist where you're experiencing maybe a rage storm or a period of the silent treatment.
Oh, yeah.
And then they'll apologize, and that's the part of the cycle. I'm sorry.
Yep,
I love you. It won't happen again.
Yep.
And then you're off to the races. Right. And then they're good for a while.
But you don't know how long.
And you also don't know what's gonna be to set them off, right? Next? So it's that constant walking on eggshells thing until the next time and the next thing that happens, and they're set off and you're off to the races. And then you just continually go round and round in this cycle.
Awful.
But the more that you stay in this relationship, the more trauma bonded you are to this person.
Right.
The trauma bond only gets stronger. It gets stronger and harder to break, because the more trauma that you go through with a person, the more trauma bonded you are.
Right.
And the thing that we don't understand. By we, I mean the survivors. We think that this pull, this strong tie that we feel to this person, and oftentimes it gets to a point where we feel like we can't live without this person. It's so strong.
Right.
We think that this is love. Right. Okay. We think this feeling that we feel is love. This compulsion to be with this person, this fear that if this person leaves us that we're going to die, literally. Right. I mean, I felt that way. I know others that felt that way. People, that's not love.
Right.
That is trauma bonds.
Yeah.
You are feeling trauma bonded, and trauma bonds are harder to break than any other kind of addiction, because not only are you feeling this emotional pull and this emotional tug, but your brain has been rewired because of this intermittent reinforcement.
Well, I just want to point out to our audience what 4 signs they should be looking for to see if they have this trauma bond, because I think it's very interesting to hear about, but a lot of people say, meh, that's not me, right?
Yeah.
That's not me. I don't have that. Well, one is, if you're a victim and you cover up or make excuses for your abuser, your girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife's behavior, that's a big red flag of a trauma bond.
Or your parent or your boss, or
your sibling,
because you can be trauma bonded to anybody.
Correct.
When you go through this sort of experience with them.
Absolutely. And listen, the narcissistic abuse is so entangled with guilt and shame and embarrassment that it's hard to separate those feelings and to determine that you have suffered actual emotional abuse.
And the reason for that is because, they've convinced you that it's normal. When you are in this sort of space with a toxic person, they convince you that toxic is normal. And then you're lost in the sea of cognitive dissonance, right?
Oh.
And it's that, it's so confusing to anybody. But now that you've had your whole identity attacked by this person, it's even harder to find your way out.
Yes.
So what are some other signs?
Number 2, you as a victim are lying to friends and family about the abuse.
Yep.
Number 3, you don't feel comfortable leaving the abusive situation. Or 4, you as the victim think it's your fault.
Yes.
Which we are here today to tell you it is not your fault. And you did nothing to deserve this.
Yes. I think that's one of the ways that they keep you entangled in this, is because of the blame shifting, the gaslighting, all of the tactics that they use to shift it back onto you. And generally speaking, we're talking about the survivor who is an empath or codependent. So, we absorb all of it.
Yes.
We're the ones that are reflecting, saying, maybe it is my fault. Maybe I did, I remember.
Maybe I'm the narcissist.
That's right. Maybe I've heard that many times.
My
Yeah.
gosh.
Yes. Because you have a conscience, and you're trying to figure your way out of it.
Well, the other part of this that I think is so awful, and I hear this repeatedly, is that the other person, the non-narcissistic personality disordered person, just wants to make the relationship work. And so they put their head down and they're like, it's not that bad. I can do this. I can make peace. I can
You've
please
got children.
everybody.
You've got a history. You've got all these reasons
Or
why you want
I
to
need
make
to
it
work here. I need this job. Whatever it is.
It's my family member. It's there's so many reasons that we give ourselves to stay stuck in this place.
Yep. So how do we break this? How do we break a trauma?
Yes. So yes, honestly, this is such a difficult process to break a trauma bond, because trauma bonds it's like, I envision it like in my mind is like this, like these vines, like these black vines just sort of like wrapped around your heart. And it's like, you almost have to just, you have to figure out a way to unwrap yourself from it. It's like you feel like you're chained to this person and you don't know how to unchain yourself. Because of the guilt, fear, and obligation, right? There's so much of that's like you said, that's intertwined in these relationships. So the first thing that I recommend, and we have a whole list, but the first thing that I recommend, and I do recommend this to people, when they come to see me in the context of a legal consultation, sometimes people just aren't there yet. They're still in this space. They're still trauma bonded to the person. They still have, feel like there's maybe hope to that person to change and all this kind of stuff. So until you've gotten to a place where you recognize that the only person you have control over is you, right? And the only person who can change, or that, you have any control over changing, is you,
right?
Okay. Right. You're not ready to leave. Okay. And everyone's ready to leave at their own time. Just like in any abusive situation, it generally takes a person up to 7 times where they've attempted to leave and they go back. So this is a very common thing before they're able to actually leave. Trauma bonds are at the root of why it's so difficult to leave an abuser. But one of the first things that I recommend is see a counselor. Make an appointment, even if you have to do it behind your partner's back. Make an appointment with somebody who has expertise in narcissism and narcissistic abuse, cluster B personality disorders. Not every counselor understands what this is. And as Lynn said earlier, if you go to somebody who minimizes what you're saying because you're not being physically attacked, that's just going to make things worse.
It's going to delay your healing process.
You need to talk to somebody who understands what a narcissistic abuse is, what emotional abuse manipulation is. Here at the Center for Hope of Western New York, we have counselors who understand that. If you live in New York State, we can work with you virtually. Please contact us, 716-955-9658. We can help you, in this initial part of your journey. The second thing that somebody can do if they're not ready to talk to a counselor is talk to a coach. And I'm going to turn it over to our narcissistic abuse recovery coach, Lynn. Why would it be important to talk to a coach?
Well, number one, I think it's so important to talk to someone. And so much of the time, it's easier to talk to someone that's not in your immediate circle of friends because of the shame and the embarrassment and the guilt. I think it's so important to discover the actual elements of narcissistic abuse and learn more about it so that it's validating to know that you have suffered. It's validating and comforting to know that other people have suffered similarly. You are not the only one. I get that so many times where people say to me, I thought I was, by myself. I thought I was all alone. I didn't know that other people had suffered similar things in other situations. And so for me, when I talk to someone and I see how much pain they're in, I'm able to guide them through my coaching program step by step. I meet with them weekly, and I have a framework where I address all the issues of narcissistic abuse, but every client has a unique situation, and so everything is customized to them. But it's so important because it will help you to begin that healing process.
Yes, and that's, and part of it is, educate yourself. If you have begin to suspect that you're in a relationship with somebody that's disordered, there's so much information on the internet.
Yes.
Start researching it, and start following some of the people who are talking about this regularly.
Yes.
Self-care is another big thing. I know it's really difficult when you're, in a relationship like this because you feel like you're drowning.
Yes.
But you need to give yourself that lifeline.
Yes.
And try to find something that you enjoy. Maybe take a class, spend time with friends, go out and give yourself a massage, or go hiking, or do something for you.
Even more than that, I like to guide my clients with some breathing exercises, and I strongly encourage meditation. And I feel like I am one of the people on this earth who was born without patience, and so meditation is very challenging for me, and yet I now do it every day because I find that it is so critical for self-care.
Yeah.
And so whether that involves prayer, whatever your background is, or it's just time spent in quiet meditation, I think that it's very important. Sometimes it's just about taking a walk, or taking a bath or a shower and putting on clean clothes.
Half an hour for you.
Yeah.
Half an hour for you. One of the other things that you mentioned before we started the podcast today was about journaling, and can you just talk about that quickly, because I think it was an important thing.
Yeah. So and I do recommend this to many of my clients, because what happens is when you're in the moment, you need to record what's happening. And look, my handwriting's terrible, so for me, I always typed it. But if you can, just grab a notebook, grab something, and write down the date and what happened and how you're feeling. Because later on, when you're writing notes that are contemporaneous, that are in that, you can see that same day and time, you can look back and say, oh, that happened. Because you tend to gloss over some things, and you tend to forget some of the worst things that happen, and the journaling will really remind you this is not going away, and you can probably see the cycle if you're journaling.
Yes, I think it's very helpful, and it also is helpful to ground you in reality when your abuser is trying to gaslight you out of your reality.
Yes.
So you can go back and say, no, this is what happened.
This is what you said.
Exactly.
Yes.
For yourself too. One of the other things that I would recommend is to join a support group. That way you can be among other people who are in, different stages of recovery from a relationship like this, whether it be, again, through the center, we offer a support group, or, one of the things that I think is really helpful is CODA. It's Codependency Anonymous. It's one of the things that we struggle with as empaths and codependents is setting boundaries, holding on to those boundaries, and learning how to be able to let some of that stuff go in relationships, and you can learn a lot of that through a support group. Great. So, was there anything else you wanted to add today?
Not today.
Okay.
I think we covered a lot today.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.